It started with laughter, the kind that rolls through a room when pride mistakes itself for power. No one knew that day in the dealership would end up carved into the memories of every man who had ever underestimated someone based on the dirt on their hands. He walked in wearing a coat too thin for winter, boots that had seen better decades, and a beard tangled by the road. They called him the Ragged Man. But when he spoke, there was something in his voice, a steady calm that made even the hum of the showroom lights pause. "I'll take 5 Mercedes trucks," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. The salesman exchanged smirks. One snorted. Another leaned back, arms crossed. The laughter began. But they didn't know what that man carried in his silence, the kind of story that starts with loss and ends with legacy. He had a name once, but most people in the small town of Riverbend had long forgotten it. They just called him Old Ben. He'd worked at the mill until it shut down, then on the roads, patching holes others made. He never complained, never owed anyone a dime. But after his wife's death, the light in his eyes dimmed, and the world began treating him like a shadow. He sold everything, his house, his tools, even his pickup truck, to pay her hospital bills. When she was gone, he drifted. Some said he lost his mind. Others said he lost his will. But those who really knew him, the few who still waved when he walked by, knew he was searching for something he couldn't explain. One cold morning, Ben found himself sitting on the steps of a diner, sipping the free coffee a waitress named Ruthie always slipped him. She was the kind of woman who saw through faces and into hearts. "You still chasing those dreams of yours, Ben?" she asked. He smiled faintly, just making sure I can look her in the eyes when I see her again. That day, he read in the paper about a local Mercedes dealership announcing a charity contest. Build a vision, win a truck. It was meant to highlight small business owners. But Ben wasn't one, not yet. Still, something about it stirred him. He went to the junkyard that afternoon, stared at the heap of metal and rust he'd been sleeping beside, and whispered, "Let's make something out of this mess." For the next 3 months, Ben worked like a man possessed. He collected discarded scrap, rebuilt old engines, welded frames in the flickering light of a single bulb. His hands bled, his back screamed, but his heart was alive again. Ruthie brought him sandwiches every evening, sometimes staying late to talk. "Why 5 trucks, Ben?" she asked one night. He paused, eyes softening. One for each dream she and I had before she got sick. One for every promise I never got to keep. The day of the dealership event arrived. People from all over came to show off their businesses and shiny trucks. Then came Ben, wearing the same ragged coat, his hands still blackened from grease. He drove up in an old patched-up trailer he'd rebuilt himself, with a hand-painted sign that read, "The New Dawn Hauling Company." The crowd went silent. He didn't look like competition. He looked like a story waiting to be dismissed. But when he spoke on stage, something changed in the air. He talked about second chances, about not waiting for the world to see your worth before you start proving it. "I'm not here for pity," he said quietly. "I'm here to build again." When he finished, there was no applause, just polite smiles. Later, when he walked into the showroom, he said those same words again, "I'll take 5 Mercedes trucks." The laughter that followed was crueler this time. One salesman leaned in and said, "Sure, old man. You got a bag of gold in that coat too?" Ben only smiled. "No, just faith." They didn't know he had just received a call. His entry had won the contest. Not only 1 truck, but 5, sponsored by an anonymous donor who had been moved by his story, shared online by a journalist covering the event. The next morning, the dealership was packed again. But this time, no one laughed. The trucks were lined up outside with ribbons on them, and Ben stood there holding the keys. The same salesman who had mocked him walked up, red-faced, mumbling apologies. Ben only nodded. Never underestimate what a man can build when all he's got left is belief. He donated 2 of the trucks to young mechanics in town, gave 1 to Ruthie to help expand her diner, and used the other 2 to start New Dawn Hauling for real. Months passed, and the company grew. People began calling him Mr. Ben instead of that ragged man. He hired veterans, single mothers, and folks who'd been told no too many times. His trucks became a symbol in Riverbend, hope rolling on wheels. One evening, Ruthie found him sitting by the lot, watching the sunset reflect off the Mercedes logos. "You did it, Ben," she said softly. He smiled, eyes glistening. "No, we did it. I just stopped listening to the laughter long enough to hear what was still beating inside me." Years later, when Ben passed, his trucks led the funeral procession, 5 shining silver giants following him home. The town stood on the sidewalks, hats over their hearts, silence thick with respect. The same salesman who had once laughed whispered to his son, "Never judge a man by the dirt on his boots. Sometimes that's just the dust of the road he's conquered." And that was the legacy of the Ragged Man, the one who taught an entire town that dreams don't wear suits, and hope doesn't need permission to rise again. Because when Ben said, "I'll take 5 Mercedes trucks," he wasn't just buying metal. He was reclaiming his life and proving that the greatest wealth isn't what's in your pocket, but what's still burning in your soul.